All right, guys. So today's guest is a woman's mindset coach and mind-body practitioner who has devoted her time to understanding and teaching the interconnectedness of neuroscience and mind-body connection. Through her own years of darkness and adversity, she has equipped herself with the life-changing tools to shine her own light so bright that she inspires others to do the same. So please help me welcome the woman who went from being a hospitality worker as a teenager to now a multiple six-figure entrepreneur, helping women all across the globe liberate above the constraints of their mind. My friend, Miss Nikki Casa.
You. So excited to be here. Thanks, Morgan.
I'm fired up to have you on. It's funny. I've actually, I've watched you on Instagram for a while, actually. Like, we've kind of followed each other for a little bit. And I've seen just like the stuff you do and you talk about. And I'm like, that's really cool. And then you came to Dreamfest. We met at Dreamfest. And then I was just like, it was just funny because I used to look at you as like someone else already doing epic shit in the space as well. Then you come along to Dreamfest. And the first thing I was actually thinking, I was like, why is this chick at Dreamfest when like she's also like really smart in this space as well? And it's just so fucking funny because then later I found out that you were sitting in the audience looking at me going like intimidated by me.
Yeah.
And it's just fucking funny, but now we're BFFs and the rest is gonna be history, right?
Of course.
But I'm really excited to bring you on because, I've gotten to know you a lot more over the last couple of months. I've seen, you've done a few of my events now, but what I love so much about you is everything you have been through that's taught you all the things that you know now and what you're doing with the women. So please tell the audience a little bit about where did this drive come from? Where did this desire come from to really help women specifically break free from their molds of their mind and tap into higher levels of potential?
Yeah, awesome. So I think that a lot of my like origins for why I do what I do always comes back to my own experiences going through what I teach women. I have like a bit of a motto, which is I never tell my clients to practice what I don't do for myself. Mm-hmm. So everything that I teach them is models, philosophies, trainings that I've all integrated and done in my life and has really had tremendous impacts on me and why I do what I do. And a lot of it does stem back to my past and some of the traumas that I went through and being able to integrate those lessons from those experiences. And we all have things that we go through in our past. We all have adversities. We've got, full spectrum of traumas, whether they're really big and things that were really scary and situations that you'd never wish upon anyone else. And then there's small things as well that a lot of people don't necessarily consider as traumas, and they push them really far into the psyche, pretending that they don't really matter. And although they might seem really small, potentially at the time it's quite big for the younger parts of us. And so when we start to look at these spectrums of traumas, whether they're big or small, and we begin to integrate them and how they used to hold us back, we can actually really liberate ourselves from them, and they can empower us to do incredible things. And that's what I've done. A lot of my journey to growth has been going back and not necessarily I wouldn't say attaching to the past and using that as a driving force, but more so undoing the stories and the meanings that I associated from what happened and allowed me to really be quite free. And so I did all of this personal development work on myself, and I was like, fuck, I have been able to change my life through personal development. And I was a PT at the time, 4 years ago. I was personal training in the gym and I was good at it, but my clients would come in for, one session, two sessions a week. And most of the time they would just complain about how shit their life was. And they had okay bodies and, okay nutrition. And I just felt like something's missing here. And when I decided to do my own personal development, I was like, this is the missing piece. You can do the physical work, but mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, there's this whole other holistic level of growth and development and healing that's really missing in the fitness industry. And I call it the fitness industry for a reason, because health really is an important pillar when it comes to health and fitness industry. And so I started to look at this and I went, actually, I don't want to teach fitness to my clients at all. They can go off and learn that from some of the best coaches in the industry. I want to be known as the coach that women come to, and I really work predominantly on their mindset. But then we begin to incorporate from the body perspective things like psychoneuroimmunology. And so we're looking at how their mind...
What?
Psychoneuroimmunology. So we're looking at how their psyche, their mind, affects their nervous system. So it's a study of neuroscience. And then their nervous system affects their immune system, right? So when there's a state of disease in the body, we look back at what's happening in the mind, in the nervous system, it all starts there. And so when we look at this idea of physical, so much of it goes beyond what we can see. And since I've been doing that, like I've transformed so many women's lives, literally healed and potentially saved lives too.
So you're saying, so it all starts in mindset, essentially? Is that what you're saying? So their thoughts and things, or like I want to unpack this, because that's what I like about what you teach, because it's like I might call one thing this, and like what we said before we started, you're like, well, you call this and I call this. So I always like to hear different ways looking at things, but I have never actually gone into neuroscience per se. But I'm always fascinated about it.
Yeah.
But so talk to us about, you just mentioned these 3 levels. I guess how I heard it was mindset, and then what was next?
Nervous system,
and then
immune system.
Affects the immune system. So talk us through that. So essentially, so if that makes sense, what you're saying is if people get sick, it's because it stemmed from their thoughts and stuff?
Yeah. So psychologically, like here's a really good example. So if you grew up and you experienced a level of trauma, that then allowed you to create a maladaptive schema. And essentially what that means is your coping mechanism part of your brain creates a survival pathway to help you deal with the trauma. So let's say in that case, the survival mechanism was maybe collapse, right? And in that case, it might be you completely dissociate, you completely withdraw, maybe you actually pass out, and it helps you to deal with the trauma.
So like if the trauma gets triggered, that's how they react to it?
Exactly. So every time they are then re-triggered later in their life, they would react in the same way. Now, we know that when it comes to the survival mechanism pathway, it's a stress response, and we're not supposed to stay in prolonged periods of stress. So once upon a time, that survival pathway might have actually been really important to keep us safe, especially the initial, the first moment that happened. But what then happens is the brain goes, well, I'm going to remember this survival pathway just to keep Nikki safe, just in case this happens again. And I'm going to distort and generalize this information. And so every time I see something that reminds me of this event, I'm going to re-trigger that trauma in the body just in case to keep her safe, right? Better to be safe than sorry. And so now every time, let's say the trigger is related to men, maybe it's sexual assault. Every time you may be in an elevator with a man, every time you're alone in a room with a man, maybe there's this guy that just reminds you of him because he just has brown hair. Could be something as simple as that, someone that reminds you of this abuser potentially. The body then goes into the survival mechanism just in case to keep you safe. And if we stay in that state, what then happens is dis-ease. We're not designed as humans to stay in prolonged periods of survival. We're meant to go into it, run away from the tiger, and then we come back to homeostasis where we can rest, recover, and repair. Unfortunately, in a very overstimulated and stressed society that we live in today, most people are stuck in survival. That's why people are burnt out. That's why people are chronically stressed. That's why people have really shit sleep. It's because they're stuck in survival. And that's what leads to a torrent of dis-ease, which is what we're talking about when we look at the immune system. The immune system becomes compromised, people get sick.
So talk to us about the other types of survival, right? Because so from what you're saying is a lot of people, you just said a lot of people get stuck in survival these days and they're stressed out, and that's what leads to burnout and blah, 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 blah. And before we started talking on this podcast, you said there's different types. So talk to us, what are the different types and how does somebody identify?
Yeah, so most people have heard of the term fight or flight, but there's actually 3 other survival pathways as well. So
fight and flight.
Fight and flight.
Yep.
We also then have freeze.
Yep.
Collapse. And attach.
Interesting. Okay, so break them all down. Break them all down for us. What are they?
So we have when we look at our disintegrated survival, so these are the types of survival that one might use the language of unhelpful. In neuroscience, we prefer to use the terms of like unresourceful. And that's dependent for everyone on your goals. So what's really helpful for one person might not be for someone else. So when we look at it from a general sense, fight might literally look like you yelling at your partner. It might look like hypercriticalness with yourself. Right? So it's not just physical. It can be very emotionally and psychologically based.
And this happens when they're stressed.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah.
All forms of stress is a survival response.
Mm.
We'll get to integrated stress in a moment, but disintegrated, this is when it's not helpful, it's not very resourceful. We're sort of in like a hijack. We don't really know what's happening. It's very unconscious, right? You just yell at your partner, and then when you're a bit calmer, you're like, oh, babe, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't mean to call you that.
We've all had moments like that when you say, that's why I like with advanced leadership, right? We talked about like breathing and actually coming back to center and then making a decision. You know, I heard this story one time. Simone, my partner, was telling me a story of there was this pilot, and he lost all his engines in the plane. He lost his engines in the plane. And his co-pilot and him were freaking the fuck out. And they're like, we're gonna fucking die. And the pilot, what he does next, he goes, sit on your hands. He says to the pilot, sit on your hands. And they're fucking going down, spearheading to the earth. And they're like, sit on your hands. Sits on his hands and allowed him just to get calm for a moment. And then he made a decision. And he was able to safely land the plane. And because like we've all had moments like that where we react. It's exactly what happens, right? We get stressed out, we do something, and then you react. And that's what I'm hearing from you, right? So the people who go into fight, they say stupid shit. And then a little bit later, they're like, shouldn't have said that, right? So that's the fight. So when we react and we say shit, or we lash out, or do something we probably shouldn't have said, that's fight. Is that correct?
Yeah. So fight is, lash out. And then it can be really internal. So people who are like perfectionists and hypercritical of themselves is where like a lot of negative self-talk comes from. We then have the flight. So flight. So this would look like you avoiding certain things. It might be your feelings. You avoid your feelings and you self-soothe with food. It might look like social anxiety. So you're in a situation where you're like, I'm feeling really uncomfortable. I'm out of my comfort zone. I don't know these people. Do they like me? Right? Or your fears start coming up. You might literally just want to leave. Or you go really quiet. So flight is often like a part of us that just wants to resist and avoid something. We then have freeze. So this would, in a situation, let's say in a public speaking capacity, a lot of speakers probably fear this. It's like, what if I get up on stage and freeze and I forget all my words? I had this fear when I was a dancer. It was like, it's this scary thing getting up on stage and forgetting all your dance moves. It's like, what if I freeze and forget? On an emotional capacity, we might find that we feel very numb. So there's like, we're not quite sure what to feel. We just sort of like feel a bit stuck. So a lot of inertia. So inertia is like an inability to get started. It's like harder to go through the resistance. So that's where freeze would show up. We then have collapse. And collapse can be literally, I pass out. I know for some people in situations where they're really terrified, they can.
Wow.
And like, you know, like on a plane, like if you're about to have a plane crash, some people literally pass out. So again, like that's the collapse response.
Makes sense. Or what if they black out? Same. Or?
Yes, blackout. Yeah.
So I've met people that know that they've gone into like a rage and then it's like, I can't remember. And actually one time I was working with somebody and they're like, I can't remember anything before the age of 14. And I'm like, why? What happened at 14? And the last thing that happened was I got mad at my dad and I blacked out. And then what happened was we went further and further and further back and we found this whole part of his life that he forgot about was because it was filled with moments that were fighting with his dad and getting angry. So a lot of his memory between 0 and 14 was not there. His mind was just suppressing it because it was like, we don't want to remember it. So this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so blacking out is another form of that. And what's happening there is the body is saying, I feel so unsafe that I need to have an out-of-body experience. Like I need to literally dissociate from this experience right now because I'm either like so terrified or I can't control all of this, you know, anger and rage and anxiety that I'm feeling in my body right now. So this is common in a lot of like victim scenarios of people. A lot of people dissociate and leave their bodies to protect themselves. And it's a collapse response there.
Wow.
Blacking out. And then the last one is attach. So this is where you get codependent relationships.
Yeah, this is interesting. Talk to us about this. I haven't heard about this.
So attachment theory. So we're still talking about disintegrated. So this is where we would form unhealthy. Again, I don't love the language healthy, unhealthy, because all forms of survival are important. However, in that case, if we're looking at codependent, it's like I'm attached to that person because I need it and it fills this certain void in myself. So we're looking at unhealthy relationships. It could be attached to domestic abuse partners. So forming trauma bonds. I'm addicted to the repeated pattern of that cycle that I received when I was a child from my dad. And this is not my example, it's just a random example. And so it's an unhealthy attachment.
Very interesting. So I was going to ask how do people become aware of it, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory. You're either running away from shit, fighting things, collapsing, being attached, or what am I saying? Freezing.
Yeah.
So you said they're all useful because I agree as well. Like there might be parts someone tries to attack you, and if your mechanism is flight, it's probably fucking good. Or if you fight, it's probably good. If it's collapse, maybe not so much. Or attached, maybe not so much. Or freeze. So some of them are definitely useful. So how do they use them in a more effective way?
Yeah, so this is like the first thing we got to recognize before we go from disintegrated survival to integrated. We got to first recognize that all forms of survival, regardless of whether you believe it or not, are helpful. Because your brain and your nervous system right now are interpreting that something in your life, in your body, in your world, in your environment feels unsafe. And it's trying to protect you from that. And what I see with a lot of women that I work with is that they come in and they've got all these forms of disintegrated survival and they fucking punish themselves for it. So now they're creating a relationship with themselves that says, my body's trying to keep me safe, and I now feel unsafe by my own body's ability to naturally keep me safe. And so there's like this internal fight going on with themselves, and their body's just like, what the hell? I'm just trying to keep you fucking safe because of this pattern that you've created since you're a little girl. Like, what do you want? And what happens is we create a lot of distrust. We struggle to trust ourselves, and this is why a lot of people, when it comes to setting goals, when it comes to changing their life, like they just don't trust themselves. They don't know which decisions to make because every step along the way they hold themselves back, but then they punish themselves for it too, rather than working with it, inviting it in and doing some work on it, healing it, and being able to work with their survival pathways. And this is where we get into the integrated section.
Okay. I want to ask, how does somebody do the work and heal what they need to heal without going down the rabbit hole and being on a healing journey for 47 years?
Yeah.
Because people get addicted to their past as well. I've seen. They just get addicted to, I'm still healing. How fucking long you got to heal, bro? Do the shit, move. And that's why I'm a big fan, not fan, but I'm a big believer on that. It's like, and you've seen it at our events, we spend time on helping people heal the past, but it's like, I spend more time on let's think on the future and what we want to create now. Let's address the past, heal it, do your things, and let's put more energy into creation and moving forward then. So how does somebody do the work and heal without going down the rabbit hole and becoming an addict?
That's what I love about your work, because a lot of it does come back from, like, we want to honor the past, but it's not talk therapy. We're not going back to a therapy space where we just talk about the past. Talking about the past doesn't really change it. Yes, you have to integrate it, understand it, and learn from it so that you don't repeat the past, but just focusing on the past is not going to change your future. And so a lot of the philosophies for which I teach my clients is that healing is often an undoing process. So we want to go back to the past, but we don't want to then create more and more for us to attach to and hold on to, and new ideas and this and this and this. We actually want to begin to unbind ourselves from the stories we created growing up that told us, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I need to do this to keep myself safe. Because at the end of the day, like, we didn't come out of the womb being like, oh, well, maybe I can't do these things because I'll be judged. It's like, no, you just fucking like went in the sandpit and just like made sand castles.
You see two like 4-year-old kids and they run up to each other in the park and they throw sand at each other and say, "You're my friend now."
Yeah.
And they go,
like,
"Okay."
yeah.
And then somewhere along the journey of 4 to 40, they got all fucked up, right? So
Yeah.
I massively went more
Yeah.
unlearning.
Yeah. So it's like two things. We want to know ourselves, and then we want to learn more about ourselves. So we want to go back to know ourselves, know who we truly are, our survival pathways, our maladaptive schemas. So like our survival pathways,
So what is that? What?
maladaptive schemas. So
Yeah.
they're survival pathways that we create that quite disintegrated. So
Okay.
like perfectionism and fears
So
and things
how
like
can
that.
someone start to know themselves?
Self-inquiry, sitting with yourself. A lot of people don't actually take time to slow down and be with themselves. You know, I ask a lot of my clients all the time, when was the last time you had a moment of stillness? And you can just see their nervous system's like, must hustle. And I'm like, just like, when was the last time you slowed down and just like checked in with your emotions? And for a lot of us, like, we don't, because feeling our feelings can be hard. But it's often what we need to do to build a level of self-awareness and self-inquiry. So it's like introspection, where we can get on a curious level about who we are rather than this judgmental, like not good enough, need to be perfect level.
Mm.
And then once we know it, then we can learn it. So it's then about learning new frameworks and tools to begin to unbind yourself from your past. And then from that, it's like amplifying it. So yeah, know yourself and then learn more about yourself.
So where do you draw the line of like back to the whole how long is too long to be on the healing journey? Like what do you think about it? So like,
Ooh.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I'm trying to say? Like, because I've
Yeah.
had people come through. I'll give you an example. Like, so I had somebody attend my Dream Out Loud method earlier this year, and they had a lot of shit they were holding on to from the past, and like nearly everybody, right? She held on to it for a very long time. A lot of anger, a lot of shame, and all this stuff. And we did massive fucking processes on her and as a group and stuff, and she let like it all go, and it was fantastic. And I said to her, I said, my advice for you is to move forward now and keep progressing into like, what do you love? What are your goals? What do you want to create? What's the new story, pretty much? The new identity, really. And I said, there's these particular things that you've been doing, which were like other events that love to talk about your vulnerabilities, talk about your shame moments. And I'm like, fuck, man, you don't have to talk about them that much. Address them, move on. I said, I would avoid that and keep moving forward. But then she went back to doing it, and I've seen just the cycle restart. I'm like, man. So like why do you think that happens? That people develop some sort of attachment to who they used to be, or?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think everyone's really different. What I often see with that is that they build a sense of identity that has protected them for so long.
Yeah.
And that part, so I use a model in my coaching space called internal family systems. And essentially what that means is there's like these different parts of your psyche. And when you are healing, we want to begin to unburden those parts of our psyche. And so sometimes, let's say if it's like an inner child, their inner child might not be ready to become unburdened and let go of the control of keeping that person safe. If so they might not be ready to let go of the need to be in control and keep that person safe, because they've built such an attachment to the identity of like existing in that person's world. So what often happens is they're missing the key element of going from processing to integration. So like you want to go back and process what happened, what you made it mean, how it affected you. Yes, it happened to you. It also happened for you. Talking about it, telling people the things you never got to get off your chest, what you didn't get to, hear from your parents, all of that stuff often helps people to get it off their chest, but then they have to move into integration. If they stay stuck in processing, they are then just reaffirming that this part of them is still wounded, and that those things, I guess, were justifications that made them the way that they are. So yeah, like the main part we really want to get them to is processing the past is important. And I think for some people, they can get addicted to the processing of it because they get the validation.
The feeling of it as
Yeah.
well. And I think it's a feel of knowing, right? Like the feel of familiarity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is a really important part there is like you have to then integrate it. Otherwise, like we mentioned before, just talking about the past doesn't change it.
So how do they start to integrate their old self and the shit they went through and who they want to become?
Yeah, so one of the things we can seek to understand is like back to the survival pathways of why they're there in the first place. So, for example, like one of the things that I've noticed with a lot of people that come to my space is fight and flight are one of the two core survival pathways. And instead of telling ourselves that we need to stop doing what our nervous system is literally designed to do, which is keep us safe, we want to look at, okay, so if this was a disintegrated survival pathway, you know, fighting with my partner, never having any relationships that make me feel safe, how do I then integrate this survival pathway and not stop doing what my nervous system is literally designed to do, which is keep me safe, but integrate it in a way and actually use it to my advantage and deploy my nervous system's strongest coping mechanism to actually support and empower me in my life. And so when we start to understand this is where it becomes really, really, really fucking powerful. So I'm going to use Morgan for an example. I remember, you know, a lot of the stories that you share growing up is that there was, like, as you were going through your tradie life and your mum had a partner who was quite, like, abusive, and there was a point where you literally got in a fight with him. And so growing up, you can see, like, Morgan's survival pathway was, like, fight. But now if we look at how he's integrated it, and he probably has done this subconsciously because this is the first time you're hearing about integrated survival pathways. And like it just goes to show how sophisticated our nervous systems can be. Integrated fight looks like assess, plan, diligent, action taker. They are very, very intelligent, entrepreneurial-like, CEO. Yeah. So they're like, they just fucking get shit done. It's like get shit done mentality.
But that's integrated. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, integrated fight.
That's interesting. Oh, integrated fight.
Yes.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yes. So like, you know, I remember I was listening to another podcast you did and they were like, if you could be one animal, what would you be? And you're like, fucking lion. And I was like, yes, because it's like the fighter in you, right? So like, you're not going to be the like little like deer that runs away and like goes into flight. Like, no, you go for the attack, you go for the kill. So that's your integrated fight. So you can see when it comes to our survival pathways, they can actually, when we use them to our advantage and know which one that our nervous system really likes doing the most, deploy them and use them to our advantage and get ourselves back out of disintegrated survival and back into our integrated.
So what is it? Can you give us an example of the integrated of the other ones?
Yeah. So integrated flight this is me. So they are very self-expressive. They're very imagination. They're very creative. So these are very artistic people. They're very right brain. They like imagination. They're very good at like design and marketing, things like that. Integrated freeze would be that they're very like a little bit more like curious, very like quiet, but they're kind of like very good at like thinking and just sort of it is almost like an Elon Musk, like very sort of like, he's not like your hard-hitting entrepreneurial guy. Yeah. Very good at taking action, but he's very kind of like
assess like.
Yeah, like he's just kind of like still and like very interesting the way he kind of like, they're very curious observer like. So I like to use that language of parts, curious observer. Then we have our collapse. Now this is when we're looking at like stillness and self-care and slowing down and literally stopping and just being. They're very good at introspection, so very good at sort of tuning in and getting very reflective with their thoughts. And then integrative attach. This is where we're looking at community, connection, belongingness, building a sense of like really good teams, things like that.
Very cool.
Very, very cool. When you can start to recognize what your survival pathway is and then begin to integrate it, you give your nervous system a lot of capacity to feel safe.
Yeah, I like this. It's cool. Talk to us, me. Talk to all of us here about the window of tolerance. What is that?
Yeah, so when we're looking at integrated and disintegrated survival pathways, in order for us to get out of disintegrated and come back into a level where we can use our survival pathways to work for us rather than against us, we want to go into what's called this window of tolerance. So think of it as like a battery. So every day you like charge your battery, and each day you use that battery, it gets less and less, and it gets more and more depleted, and eventually it goes flat and it dies. So think of your ability to stay focused, to stay integrated, to stay calm in a very similar way. The more you charge that up, the wider your capacity to stay in your integrated survival becomes. But because we live in a society where that's not valued, you know, we value success and like money and you fucking like just do it. A lot of people don't take time to go like, what do I really need right now to make sure I'm not stressed? So like starting your day, like if everyone listening, like what's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning? Most people wake up and check their phone. And so automatically you're going into a state of disintegrated fight. Because like all this stimulus coming at you, and now you've got this torrent of negative self-talk going on because you're comparing yourself to some girl that's just popped up with, you know, 6% body fat who's just competed, or this guy who's got this success that you really want who's, you know, 20 years ahead of you, and you're comparing yourself to him. Already now you're in a disintegrated survival pathway. So a lot of people aren't actually setting themselves up, particularly at the start of the day, to then have a really expanded capacity to sit with their stresses. So they get to work and they're already stressed, and this little thing happens and they get triggered and they lose their shit, they lose their cool, and they go into their unconscious mind. They operate, most people, on an autopilot, especially if they're in a 9-to-5 corporate. They get home, and what happens, what goes up eventually must come down. They've got all this adrenaline, all this stress. They get home, they end up collapsing. And that might look literally on the couch, Netflix. They watch, 7 episodes and binge watch, eat Uber Eats, go to bed, wake up and do the same shit the next day.
Do you see particular people with these, we'll call them archetypes, do you see them in certain jobs? Like, because what I'm hearing from this, it sounds like someone who's like that, the, I guess, integrated fight, are they more likely to do like sales, like, or is this just irrelevant?
Yeah, you're looking at more with your hard action takers, sales, entrepreneurs, business, company owners, people that are really good at getting shit done.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking, like, it's good for people to be aware of this and actually go, okay, what would I naturally just, like, how can I use this to my advantage? Because like I excel in entrepreneurship and business and sales and marketing, and because I just fucking love it, like push. But the Elon Musk more calmness approach to decision making is not me. My decision making is, if it takes longer than 2 seconds, just make a decision. Just bang. Like I'm just like, let's just move shit forward, and we'll see if something collapses. If it collapses, then we'll reassess that. Because I use that to my strength. So, yeah, that's really curious.
Yeah, I mean, like, the cool thing about it is that, like, we have all 5 of them. So we can begin to oscillate between, one or two. So I notice when I'm running my business from the operations side, I'm in my integrated fight. Get shit done, like, let's go. But then when I'm with my clients, I'm more in my flight, because I often have to be to psycho-analyze and help them determine best possible pathways. So it's very reflective, it's very introspective, it's very creative thinking. It's not necessarily like, well, why didn't you, do your goals you said you were going to do? Sometimes you give them a bit of tough love. But you got to oscillate a little bit. So, one of the things that I think, they say survival of the fittest, human beings are. I don't think we're survival of the fittest. I think we're survival of the best adaptability. We've been the most adapted species, right? So I think that our ability to adapt and oscillate between our survival pathways is what a very high level, successful human being really looks like. Because when you're able to integrate these survival pathways and begin to know that when I'm running my business, I'm a little bit harder, and when I'm with friends or family or my clients, I'm a little bit more softer. I'm probably in my little freeze introspective state. And then when I'm with my lover, my partner, I'm in my attach. I'm connecting with them. I'm a little bit more in my feminine. I'm slowing down. I'm building connection with them, right?
You hit the nail on the head. It's, the person who has the most flexibility of behavior will control the system. And that's not in a narcissistic way.
Yeah, their nervous system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll call it that, right? Will literally control the reality,
Yeah.
their own reality.
Yeah.
If you're only really good at being like fight, if you're only really good at, we'll just keep this language, like really good at that one thing, but you can't, if you're uncomfortable, like what do I call it? Like, so that's why like you also just come to advanced leadership with us, but advanced leadership is all about helping people really develop that range. All right. And trainers training, you wait to trainers training. Trainers training is literally about that, like discovering range, because to be a trainer and a speaker, I use the example, you need to be able to be comfortable with meditating with a monk and then drinking with a bikie on the same day. You know, having that flexibility of behavior to be like, I can tap into that. That's like, I guess that I've worked on that, and that's probably unconsciously integrated these, which is really cool. For people, if they want to learn more about neuroscience, like where did you start? Where did somebody start learning about neuroscience?
Well, personally for me, I worked with a neuroscientist for 1.5 years.
Cool, like as a coach or?
I was a student, so not necessarily a client, a patient or client. I was a student, and we were learning a framework underneath them for about 1.5 years. And then, which we can talk about another time because we'll be here forever, I did about 4 to 6 months of neuroscience and communication. So we learn about storytelling and what happens in our nervous system when we tell stories, which is super, super
What
cool.
happens when we tell stories? Tell me.
We want to take people on a journey with their nervous systems. And, you know, when you hear someone tell a story and, like, they just do it from this, like, really monotone. Yeah, like your nervous system, like, taps out. So, you know, when we tell stories, it's why we get so captivated by motivational speakers.
You like my stories?
I love your stories. I'm like, sometimes I'm literally sitting on the edge and I'm like, tell me. And then he'll change. Morgan would like change stories. And I'm like, my nervous system's like raging on the inside.
Do you know what your mind's doing? It's left there going. So actually, I'll tell you this one little thing. What happens if you share a story, share a little bit of a story, walk right up to the cliffhanger? So what happens next? No.
Yeah.
right when I was about to that.
Doing.
What the unconscious mind actually goes, it says, and then what happened? So it's ready for give me. So the unconscious level, it's open to receive. Yeah. So I'll share stories, and I'll talk, and I'll leave right up there, and I'll leave it open, and then teach a whole bunch of shit. And unconsciously, conscious mind's distracted, unconscious mind's taken it all in. I close the loop, put it all back together, and then now I feel good. I got closure. It's all very unconscious, conscious learning.
Yeah, it's so fascinating.
You'll learn at training.
Neuroscience is amazing.
Fucking
I love
sick.
it. But
I want to study more of it, like specifically on that stuff, because I love like what happens in the brain when, like all this stuff, like the chemicals get released when you do this and that and that. And
yeah, look, I would start with Joe Dispenza's work. He has a really beautiful, I guess, curriculum that he facilitates in his books. So starting with breaking the habit of being yourself is like a go-to recommendation, and then working up to his book Becoming Supernatural, where he dives into a little bit more of the quantum physics side of that. And then one thing that really fascinates me with the survival pathways, because Joe Dispenza doesn't talk much about survival pathways. He talks about, you know, conscious, unconscious mind, is learning polyvagal theory, which is, again, looking at how our body really interprets our survival pathways. So, you know, like one of the things I've learned heaps about Morgan when it comes to public speaking is like working with your body when you're regulating your fears. Like, yes, mindset is important. And I used to be the person that was like, mindset is everything. Like, it's not everything, because you also have a nervous system which controls your survival pathways. So if you're not working with your fears and you're not working with your body, you're only tapping into the psychological part of your growth, your healing, your expansion. You got to work with your body too, so that you've got mind and body coherence.
I love it. Nikki, where can everybody find you and check out everything you do and your podcast and all your goodness?
Yeah, so come give me a little Instagram stalk. I'm Nikki Kassa, KSS. With an I. I should just spell it, the whole thing. And KICASSA. And if you're a female and you're listening, I would love to have you come and work with us in the Conscious Woman come into the container. We will literally liberate your mind from all your constraints, your past, your fears, your anxieties, your traumas, big or small. All your stories really matter in that space. And we really pride ourselves on creating a really, really safe space for women to come and do inner work. So whether you're new to it and you've never done anything like this before, or you're on a more advanced level with this, we also have level 2 of the conscious woman. And this is really looking at higher levels of consciousness, really looking at elevating your life and transforming it. And then also next year, depending on when you're listening to it, but in 2023, I'm launching and publishing my first book,
Boom.
The Conscious Woman.
When?
August next year.
Amazing. Have you already written it or writing now?
No, writing it now, working with a publicist and an author coach. So yeah, it is under development at the moment. And even guys, if you really want to get your hands on it, it would give you such a interesting insight into your partners, girlfriends, your mothers. It's not gender biased to just women. It's just the cover. But yeah, guys, if you want to get your hands on it too, maybe a Christmas present for next year as well.
I love it. So awesome. So Nikki, this has been fucking incredible. I love hanging out with you. I love talking with you. You're awesome. I got a final question for you. Are you ready?
Okay, go.
If you were to go back to your 18-year-old self and give her 30 seconds of advice, what would it be?
Yeah, so you know how most people are like, everything happens in divine way. It really does. But, I'd go back to my 18-year-old self and I'd tell her that she's loved. I spent most of my childhood and my teenage years rebelling and taking pain and punishment and self-resentment out of myself and others. And for a really long time, and still going through my healing of this, is knowing that I'm good enough and I'm worthy and I'm loved. And, the process of undoing a lot of what we then replace resentment and pain and trauma and grief with is love. So I wouldn't go back and give her, existential, philosophical advice, because she wouldn't have got it back then at 18. I would have just said, Nikki, you are enough. You are loved. You are worthy.